The emergency signal reached the Galactic Council chambers at exactly 1427 Standard Galactic Time. Ambassador Zelthar was the first to notice the red warning light flashing on his console. His forearms moved quickly across the controls, pulling up the distress message on the main viewing screen. The face that appeared belonged to Colony Director Zixnall, a Valran. His species looked like large insects with gentle, compound eyes and delicate antennae. Right now, those antennae were shaking with fear. Behind him, other Valran were running in panic. "This is Colony Director Zixnall of Epsilon 7. We are under attack. A Krathix pirate fleet has surrounded our planet. They demand tribute we cannot pay. They threaten to destroy our cities and strip our world of all resources. We have no weapons, no defense systems. Please, anyone who can hear this message, we need help immediately." The transmission cut out, replaced by static. The council chamber fell silent. 12 different species had representatives there, sitting in their designated seats around the circular room. They all knew what a Krathix attack meant. The Krathix were not just pirates. They were one of the most violent species in the galaxy. They took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. Ambassador Kelran from the Porvian Empire spoke first. His blue skin darkened with concern. "The Valran are peaceful traders. They have helped all of our civilizations at one time or another. We must respond to their call." "Of course we must," agreed Ambassador Threx, her crystalline body chiming softly as she moved. "But who will go? The Krathix fleet is not small. Our intelligence reports say Warlord Vexnar himself leads this attack." That name made several ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Vexnar was legendary among the Krathix. He had conquered 47 colonies in his lifetime. His fleet had destroyed 2 Galactic Council peacekeeping forces in the last decade. No one had ever defeated him. "The Porvian fleet is currently defending our mining operations in the Outer Rim," Kelran said, his voice heavy with regret. "It would take us 3 weeks to reach Epsilon 7. Ambassador Threx shook her crystalline head. "The Centauri defensive fleet is engaged in training exercises. By the time we mobilize and travel there, the Valran colony could be destroyed." One by one, each ambassador gave similar reasons. Their fleets were too far away, too small, or already committed to other operations. The reality was clear to everyone in the room. They were all afraid. The Krathix were brutal, and Vexnar had never lost a battle. Zelthar listened to all of them, his forearms folded across his chest. He was old for a Centauri, his skin marked with the ceremonial tattoos of a veteran diplomat. He had seen many crises in his long career. Finally, he stood up. "There is one option we have not discussed," he said quietly. The other ambassadors turned to look at him. Several seemed confused. What option could they have missed? "We could send the humans," Zelthar continued. The reaction was immediate. Several ambassadors started talking at once. Some looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few even looked frightened. "The humans?" Ambassador Threx's crystalline body changed color, showing her surprise. "But they only joined the council 20 years ago. They are still newcomers." "Newcomers with a reputation," Zelthar replied. "A reputation that even the Krathix respect." Ambassador Kelran leaned forward. "That reputation is exactly what concerns me. The humans fight without honor. They use tactics that civilized species would never consider. They break all the rules of proper warfare. Which is exactly why they might succeed where we would fail," Zelthar said. "The Krathix do not respect our civilized warfare. They see our honor codes as weakness, but they fear the humans." "Fear and respect are not the same thing," another ambassador argued. "No, they are not," Zelthar agreed. "But right now, the Valran do not need respect. They need someone who can actually stop Vexnar. Can any of us honestly say our fleets could do that?" Silence fell over the chamber again. No one could answer that question with confidence. "I have read the reports about human military actions," Ambassador Threx said carefully. "During the border wars with the Krathix 5 years ago, the humans fought them to a standstill. But the cost was high. Many human soldiers died. The battles were vicious and terrible." "Yes," Zelthar said, "but the Krathix withdrew. That had never happened before. The humans are the only species that has ever made the Krathix retreat." A younger ambassador, representing the Viridian Collective, raised her hand. She had only recently been appointed to the council, and still looked nervous when speaking. "Forgive my ignorance, but I do not understand. Humans are smaller than Krathix. Their technology is not more advanced than ours. Their ships are not larger. Why do the Krathiks fear them? Zelthar looked at her with his wise old eyes. Because humans are unpredictable. Every other species in this galaxy fights according to rules and traditions. We have codes of honor. We conduct warfare in ways that are understood and expected. Humans do not. That sounds like a criticism, the young Viridian said. Perhaps it is, Zelthar admitted, but it is also the truth. When you fight humans, you cannot predict what they will do. They adapt. They improvise. They use psychology as a weapon. They make their enemies afraid to fight them again. Ambassador Kelrin drummed his fingers on his console. If we send the humans, we risk offending many council members who believe in honorable warfare. And if we do not send them, Zelthar countered, we condemn the Valrin to slavery or death. Which is more important, our pride or their lives? The debate continued for another hour. Some ambassadors argued passionately against asking for human help. Others reluctantly agreed with Zelthar. Finally, the vote was called. The result was close. 7 in favor, 5 against. The humans would be contacted. Across the galaxy on Earth, in the orbital command station above the planet, Admiral Helen Torres received the transmission from the Galactic Council. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. She read the message twice, then called for her staff. "Get me Commander Morrison," she ordered. 20 minutes later, Jake Morrison's face appeared on her screen. He was aboard the UCS Defiant, currently on patrol near the Jupiter mining colonies. He was younger than the Admiral, probably in his mid-30s, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. "Admiral," he said, nodding respectfully. "Commander, the Galactic Council has a job for us," Admiral Torres said. "A Krathik's pirate fleet is blockading a Valrin colony. They want us to intervene." Jake's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Krathik's? How many ships?" "Intelligence reports 12 heavy cruisers, led by Warlord Vexnar." Now Jake's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite a fleet for one destroyer to handle. Can you do it?" The Admiral asked directly. Jake thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am, but I'll need full authorization for tactical flexibility." Admiral Torres understood what he meant. Tactical flexibility was military code for letting Jake and his crew do whatever they needed to do, without worrying about following traditional combat rules. "You have it," she said. "The Valrin are good people, Commander. They don't deserve what the Krathiks will do to them. We'll bring them home safe," Jake promised. Defiant out. The screen went dark. Admiral Torres sat back in her chair and looked out the window at Earth below. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 20 years, but they had already earned a reputation. Some species respected them. Some feared them. Some thought they were dangerous and uncivilized. Maybe they were right. But when someone needed help desperately, when the enemy was too strong for anyone else to face, the galaxy called the humans. She just hoped the Valrin understood what they were getting. Human help came with a guarantee of survival, but it was not pretty to watch. Humans did not fight like other species. They fought to win, and they used every advantage they could find. On the Defiant, Commander Jake Morrison gathered his senior officers in the briefing room. There were 4 of them, his core team. Lieutenant Amy Parker was his pilot, a woman with red hair tied back in a ponytail and a grin that never seemed to leave her face. She flew the Defiant like it was an extension of her own body. Lieutenant Ben Carter handled tactical systems. He was quiet, analytical, and could calculate firing solutions faster than the ship's computer. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the Marine detachment. She was tough, professional, and her soldiers would follow her anywhere. Danny Brooks was the chief engineer, a man who understood the Defiant's systems better than anyone. He could fix anything and had a talent for making the ship do things it was not designed to do. "All right, people," Jake said, bringing up a star map on the screen. "We have a rescue mission. Valrin Colony, Epsilon 7, blockaded by a Krathik's fleet. 12 cruisers. Warlord Vexnar in command." Amy whistled. "Vexnar? Didn't he destroy those 2 council peacekeeping forces?" "Yes," Jake confirmed. "He's good. His fleet is well-trained and heavily armed. So what's our approach?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled slightly. "We're going to do what we do best. We're going to scare them." Ben looked up from his data pad. "With 1 ship against 12? "With 1 human ship," Jake corrected. They know what that means. Danny leaned back in his chair. You want to run the full psychological warfare package? Everything we've got, Jake confirmed. Ben, start planning harassment. The UCS Defiant traveled through hyperspace for 4 days. During that time, the ship was busy with activity. Every member of the crew had tasks to complete, systems to check, and plans to review. Commander Jake Morrison spent most of his time studying everything they knew about Warlord Vexnar and the Krathiks. The intelligence files were thick with information. The Krathiks were a reptilian species, covered in thick armored scales. They were bigger and stronger than humans. Their culture valued strength and conquest above everything else. They believed the strong had the right to take from the weak. Vexnar was exceptional even among the Krathiks. He had led his fleet for 20 years without a single defeat. His tactics were aggressive and brutal. He did not negotiate. He did not compromise. He simply attacked until his enemies surrendered or died. Jake sat in his quarters reading the battle reports from the border wars 5 years ago. That was when humans and Krathiks had first clashed. The fighting had been terrible. Both sides had lost many ships and many lives. But in the end, the Krathiks had withdrawn from human space. Why had they withdrawn? Jake wondered about that. The Krathiks never retreated from a fight unless they believed continuing would cost them too much. The humans had made them believe that. Not by destroying the entire Krathiks fleet, but by making every battle too costly, too unpredictable, too frustrating. The Krathiks expected their enemies to fight in specific ways. The humans had refused to follow those expectations. Jake closed the file and went to check on his crew. In the engineering section, Danny Brooks was making modifications to the Defiant systems. He had 3 junior engineers helping him, running cables and installing new equipment. How's it going, Danny? Jake asked. Danny looked up from his work, wiping grease from his hands. Almost done, Commander. I've linked our communications array to the signal warfare package. We'll be able to flood every frequency the Krathiks use. Audio, video, data streams, everything. Good, Jake said. What are we sending them? Danny grinned. I've compiled a collection of Earth's finest cultural achievements. Heavy metal music, horror movie soundtracks, recordings of human crowds cheering at sporting events, some really aggressive rap music, and my personal favorite, a loop of a crying baby. Jake raised an eyebrow. A crying baby? Trust me, Commander. Nothing disrupts concentration like the sound of a baby crying. It's instinctive. Even aliens find it disturbing. You've tested this? During the border wars, one ship used it by accident when their life support systems got damaged and picked up sounds from the nursery section. The Krathiks broke off their attack. They said later it was the most horrible sound they had ever heard. Jake smiled. All right. Load it up. In the armory, Captain Lisa Hayes was briefing her Marines. There were 40 of them aboard the Defiant, all wearing their combat armor. The armor was bulky and covered with equipment, but it allowed them to fight in space without needing a ship. Listen up, Lisa said. If we do board any Krathiks ships, remember your training. Krathiks are big and strong, but they're not fast. Use your mobility, use your team tactics, and most importantly, use your brains. One of the younger Marines raised his hand. Captain, is it true that Krathiks can tear through steel with their bare claws? Yes, Lisa said honestly. That's why you don't let them get close. You keep moving. You keep them off balance. You make them chase you through corridors that are too narrow for them. You use flashbangs to blind them. You use smoke to confuse them. You make them fight your way, not their way. Another Marine asked, what if we actually have to fight them hand to hand? Lisa looked at him seriously. Then you'd better be fast and lucky. But that's why we train. That's why we plan. We don't give them the chance for hand-to-hand combat. On the bridge, Lieutenant Ben Carter was running tactical simulations. He had created a virtual model of the Epsilon 7 system with 12 Krathiks cruisers positioned around the planet. Over and over, he tested different approaches. Direct assault? The Defiant would be destroyed in minutes. The Krathiks had too much firepower. Long-range attacks? The Krathiks' shields were designed to handle that. They could absorb massive damage from a distance. Stealth approach? Possible. But the moment they opened fire, the entire fleet would turn on them. Ben tried something different. Instead of thinking about destroying the Krathiks ships, he thought about disrupting them, making them confused, making them unable to work together effectively. He began designing attack patterns that would force the Krathiks to break formation. He calculated trajectories that would make them worry about colliding with each other. He planned ways to attack their sensors and communications without destroying the ships themselves. Lieutenant Amy Parker found him there, staring at the screen with intense concentration. "You look like you're trying to solve the universe's hardest math problem," she said. Ben looked up and rubbed his eyes. "Maybe I am. How do you beat an enemy that's stronger than you in every way?" "You don't beat them," Amy said. "You frustrate them until they don't want to fight anymore. Is that what you do when you fly?" Amy grinned. "Absolutely. I don't try to be faster than missiles. I try to make the missiles miss. I don't try to outgun enemy ships. I make them waste ammunition shooting at where I used to be." Ben thought about that. "So we don't try to destroy 12 cruisers. We try to make Vexanar think fighting us isn't worth the trouble." "Now you're thinking like a human," Amy said. On the third day of travel, Jake called another meeting with his senior officers. They gathered in the briefing room again, this time with detailed plans displayed on the screen. "All right, everyone," Jake said. "Let's review. Danny, your systems are ready?" "Ready, Commander. We can light up their communications like a Christmas tree. Lisa, your Marines? Ready to deploy. We have 12 assault pods prepared and teams assigned. Ben, tactical plans. I have 17 different harassment scenarios programmed. We can adapt based on how they respond. Amy, how do you feel about flying this mission?" Amy's grin was confident. "I feel great. The Defiant might not be the newest ship, but she can dance when she needs to." Jake nodded. "Good. Now let's talk about our overall strategy. The goal is not to destroy the Krathix fleet. The goal is to make them leave." "By scaring them?" Lisa asked. "By making them realize that fighting us will cost more than they're willing to pay," Jake clarified. "The Krathix respect strength, but they also understand pragmatism. If we can prove that holding this blockade will be too expensive, too difficult, and too frustrating, Vexanar will withdraw. But we can't show weakness," Ben added. "If we look weak, they'll just attack harder." "Exactly," Jake agreed. "So we need to be unpredictable, aggressive, seemingly reckless. We need to make them think we're crazy enough to do anything." Danny chuckled. "That shouldn't be hard. Other species already think humans are crazy." "That reputation is going to help us," Jake said. "The Krathix have heard stories about humans. They know what happened during the border wars. Some of them might already be nervous about facing us. So we play up the fear factor," Amy said. "We do more than that," Jake replied. "We teach them a lesson. We show them that blockading a peaceful colony protected by humans is a bad idea. When this is over, I want Vexanar to tell every Krathix in the galaxy to avoid human-protected worlds." The team was quiet for a moment, thinking about the mission ahead. Then Lisa spoke up. "Commander, can I ask a question?" "Go ahead." "Why do you think the Galactic Council asked for us? They have bigger fleets, more advanced technology. Why send one destroyer?" Jake thought about that question. "Because we fight differently. Every other species follows rules. They have traditions, honor codes. They fight in ways that can be predicted and countered. The Krathix understand that kind of warfare. They've learned how to beat it. But they haven't learned how to beat us," Ben said. "Not yet," Jake agreed. "And hopefully after this mission they won't want to try." On the fourth day, the Defiant prepared to drop out of hyperspace. The crew took their stations. Jake sat in the captain's chair on the bridge, watching his team work. Amy was at the helm, her hands moving across the controls with practiced ease. Ben sat at the tactical station, his screens showing weapon status and sensor data. Danny was in engineering, monitoring all the ship's systems. Lisa was in the Marine Bay, making final checks with her troops. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, Amy announced. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. One human destroyer against 12 Krathix cruisers. On paper, it was an impossible fight. But humans had never been good at accepting what was possible and what was not. "All stations, report status," Jake ordered. "Helm ready," Amy said. "Weapons ready," Ben confirmed. "Engineering ready." Danny's voice came through the intercom. "Marines ready," Lisa added. "Then let's go save some Valrin," Jake said. "Amy, take us in." The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Epsilon 7 system. Immediately, sensors detected the Krathix fleet. 12 massive cruisers arranged in a perfect blockade formation around the planet. Each cruiser was twice the size of the Defiant. On the planet's surface, the Valrin detected the new arrival. Colony Director Zixnal looked at the sensor reading with hope and confusion. Only one ship? Just one small vessel coming to help? Then his console identified the ship's signature. Human. It was a human ship. The Krathix fleet remained in position around Epsilon 7. Warlord Vexnar did not believe the human commander's threat. One ship could not possibly challenge his entire fleet. It was ridiculous. The human was either crazy or desperate. Either way, Vexnar decided to teach them a lesson. He ordered 3 of his cruisers to move toward the Defiant. They would destroy this annoying little ship, and then the blockade would continue as planned. On the Defiant, sensors detected the movement immediately. 3 cruisers breaking formation. Ben reported from tactical. Moving to engage us. Let them come, Jake said calmly. Amy, take us into the asteroid field at coordinate 773. Amy's fingers danced across her controls. Asteroid field? That's going to be tight flying. I know, Jake said. That's the point. The Defiant turned and accelerated toward a nearby cluster of asteroids. The rocks were scattered in a loose field, some as small as cars, others as large as buildings. It was dangerous territory for any ship. The 3 Krathix cruisers followed. Their commanders were confident. They had superior firepower and shields. They would corner the human ship in the asteroid field and destroy it. What they did not expect was how Amy Parker flew. The Defiant dove into the asteroid field at a speed that made the Krathix pilots nervous. Amy weaved between the rocks with seemingly impossible precision. She rolled the ship, spun it, dropped it suddenly, and climbed sharply. The Defiant moved like a fighter, not like a destroyer. The Krathix cruisers tried to follow. They were bigger and less maneuverable. They had to slow down to avoid hitting the asteroids. One cruiser clipped a large rock with its shield, sending sparks flying. They're falling behind, Amy reported, her voice excited. Should I lose them? Not yet, Jake said. Danny, initiate Phase 1. In engineering, Danny Brooks pressed a series of commands. The Defiant's communication array activated, but not to send a normal message. Instead, it began broadcasting on every frequency the Krathix used. Aboard the 3 pursuing cruisers, every speaker suddenly erupted with noise. Heavy metal music blasted through the command deck. The sound was aggressive, chaotic, and incredibly loud. The Krathix warriors grabbed their heads, trying to block out the horrible noise. What is this? One captain roared. Turn it off. But they could not turn it off. Every time they blocked one frequency, the humans switched to another. The music changed. Now it was horror movie soundtracks full of screeching sounds and ominous notes. Then it switched to recordings of human battle cries from throughout history. The Krathix communications officers tried desperately to restore normal operations, but they were losing the battle. They could not coordinate with each other. They could not hear their own orders. The noise was everywhere. One of the cruisers, confused and disoriented, nearly collided with another. They had to break off their pursuit just to avoid hitting each other. Aboard the Dreadclaw, Vexnar watched in disbelief. What are they doing? What is that noise? His communications officer looked terrified. It's the humans, Warlord. They're flooding all our frequencies with their transmissions. We can't block it. Then destroy them, Vexnar roared. But the 3 cruisers had lost track of the Defiant. The human ship had disappeared behind a large asteroid, and their sensors were being disrupted by interference. Jake watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Phase 1 successful. Ben, launch the drones. Launching now, Ben confirmed. From the Defiant's cargo bays, thousands of small objects shot out into space. They looked like tiny metal insects, each one about the size of a football. They moved with purpose, spreading out in all directions. The Krathix fleet detected the launch but did not understand what they were seeing. Were these weapons? Missiles? Their point defense systems prepared to shoot them down, but the drones were too small and too numerous. The point defense lasers managed to destroy some, but most of the drones reached their targets. They attached themselves to the hulls of the Krathix cruisers like mechanical barnacles. Aboard one cruiser, a warrior looked out a viewing port and saw dozens of the small drones stuck to the hull. What are these things? He got his answer seconds later. The drones began spraying a fine mist that surrounded the ship. The mist was reflective, catching the light from the nearby sun and making the cruiser glow like it was covered in glitter. More drones activated laser designators. Thin red beams appeared, painting targets all over the Krathix ships. To any observer, it looked like the cruisers were covered in targeting lasers, as if 100 ships were aiming at them. But there was only one ship. One small human destroyer, On the Dreadclaw, Vexnar stared at his fleet. His cruisers were covered in strange mist and laser designators. His communications were flooded with human noise, and he still could not find the Defiant. "This is not a battle," one of his officers said quietly. "This is humiliation." Vexnar's claws dug into his command chair. "Find that human ship and destroy it. I want every weapon we have pointed at it." "Warlord, we have a problem," the sensor officer reported. "The reflective mist is interfering with our targeting systems. We're having difficulty locking onto targets. Then fireblind if you have to," Vexnar ordered. 2 cruisers opened fire, shooting in the general direction where they thought the Defiant might be. Their weapons lit up the space with energy beams and projectiles. They hit several asteroids, destroying them in spectacular explosions. They did not hit the Defiant. Amy had anticipated this. She had positioned the ship behind a large asteroid, using it as a shield. When the Krathiks stopped firing, she moved the Defiant to a new position. "They're getting angry," she said cheerfully. "That's good, right?" "That's exactly what we want," Jake confirmed. "Angry enemies make mistakes. Ben, prepare Phase 2. Assault pods are ready," Ben reported. Jake opened a channel to the Marine Bay. "Lisa, you're up." "Copy that, Commander," Lisa replied. "Marines, mount up!" The 40 Marines climbed into 12 assault pods. These were small, armored vehicles designed to carry troops through space. They had basic shields and thrusters, but no real weapons. Their job was not to fight, but to deliver Marines to enemy ships. "Launch when ready," Jake ordered. The assault pods shot out from the Defiant in different directions. The Krathiks fleet detected them immediately. This they understood. These were boarding attempts. They prepared to defend against boarders. But once again, the humans did not do what was expected. The assault pods did not aim for the same ship. Instead, they split up, targeting 3 different cruisers simultaneously. The Krathiks had to divide their attention, preparing multiple ships for potential boarding actions. The pods approached their targets and attached to the hulls. The Krathiks warriors inside the ships grabbed their weapons and rushed to the boarding points. They were ready for a fight, but the Marines did not breach the hulls. Instead, they began drilling, small precise holes that vented atmosphere from non-critical sections of the ships. Not enough to endanger the entire crew, but enough to cause problems. Alarms blared throughout the 3 targeted cruisers. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically. Damage control teams rushed to patch the leaks. The warriors prepared to repel boarders found themselves instead dealing with hull breaches. One Krathiks captain realized what was happening. "They're not boarding. They're just causing damage. This is a distraction," he was right. While the Krathiks fleet focused on the assault pods, the Defiant moved to a new position. Ben prepared the next surprise. "Firing," Ben announced. The Defiant's main railgun fired, but not at a ship. The projectile shot across space and slammed into a large asteroid. The rock shattered, breaking into dozens of large chunks. Ben had calculated the trajectory perfectly. The chunks of asteroid began moving toward the Krathiks fleet. Sensors detected the incoming debris. Alarm sounded across multiple ships. "Asteroids incoming," officers reported. "Impact in 40 seconds. The Krathiks cruisers had to react. They could not just sit in formation and get hit by massive chunks of rock. They fired their point defense weapons, trying to destroy the incoming debris. They adjusted their positions, moving out of the way. Their perfect blockade formation began to break apart. Vexnar watched his fleet scatter and felt something he had rarely experienced: frustration. The humans were not fighting like warriors. They were not engaging in ship-to-ship combat. They were using tricks, distractions, harassment tactics, and it was working. His fleet was no longer in formation. His communications were still disrupted. Several of his ships were dealing with minor hull breaches. His crews were confused and angry, and he still had not managed to land a single hit on the human ship. "Warlord," his second-in-command said carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider this blockade." Vexnar turned to him with fury in his eyes. "Reconsider? You want to retreat from one small ship?" "It's not about the ship, Warlord. It's about what that ship represents. These are humans. They don't fight like anyone else. They're making us look foolish." "I don't care how they fight," Vexnar snarled. "We have 12 cruisers. They have 1 destroyer. We will crush them." But even as he said it, Vexnar knew something was wrong. This was not how battles were supposed to go. His fleet should have destroyed the human ship in the first exchange. Instead, hours had passed and his ships were damaged, disoriented and struggling to coordinate. Danny Brooks worked quickly in the engineering section, his fingers moving across multiple screens at once. Hacking alien computer systems was always challenging, but the Krathiks had a weakness. Their systems were designed for strength and reliability, not security. They believed their military power protected them, so they did not invest much in cybersecurity. That was a mistake when facing humans. "I'm in," Danny announced after 12 minutes. "I have access to 3 cruiser navigation systems. Maybe 4 if I'm lucky." "What can you do with that?" Jake asked over the intercom. "Watch and see, Commander." Aboard the Krathik's cruiser Dark Fang, the navigation officer suddenly saw his display flicker. Numbers changed. Trajectory calculations shifted slightly. Nothing major. Just small adjustments to their position-keeping systems. The ship began to drift. Slowly at first, just a few meters off its intended position. The navigation officer frowned and made corrections. But the system did not respond properly. Instead, the ship drifted more, now moving toward another cruiser. "We're experiencing navigation errors," he reported to his captain. "Fix it," the captain ordered. But before they could fix anything, the same thing happened on 2 other cruisers. All 3 ships began drifting off position, their automated systems fighting against Danny's interference. From a distance, it looked like the ships were moving toward each other on a collision course. Alarms blared. Captains shouted orders. The 3 cruisers had to fire their emergency thrusters to avoid colliding. They broke further away from their formation positions. Vexnar watched this happen and slammed his fist on his command chair. "What is happening to my fleet?" "Sabotage, Warlord," his tactical officer said. "The humans have infiltrated our navigation systems." "How is that possible?" "Our systems are secure." "Apparently not against humans, Warlord." While the Krathik's fleet struggled with navigation errors, the Defiant moved into a new attack position. This time, Jake decided to show them what the ship could really do. "Ben, target the communications relay on the flagship. Use the main railgun." "Targeting," Ben confirmed. He calculated the shot carefully. The communications relay was a small target on a ship that was constantly making minor position adjustments. It was a difficult shot. He fired. The railgun projectile crossed the distance in seconds. It struck the Dreadclaw's communications relay with perfect accuracy, destroying it in a flash of sparks. Suddenly, Warlord Vexnar could not communicate with half his fleet. The flagship's primary communications array was offline. "Get it repaired," Vexnar roared. "Now!" "Repair teams are responding," an officer said. "But it will take at least an hour." Vexnar could not coordinate his fleet properly for an entire hour. The human ship had just cut off his ability to command effectively. Jake watched the result of the shot with satisfaction. "Good shooting, Ben. Now let's show them we can do that to any system we choose. Target the secondary sensor array on Cruiser 7. Ben fired again. Another perfect hit. Cruiser 7's sensors went dark. Target the shield generator housing on Cruiser 3. Another shot. Another hit. Cruiser 3's shields flickered and weakened. The Krathik's fleet began to understand something terrifying. The human ship was not just harassing them. It could strike with surgical precision at any target it chose. They could destroy critical systems without even destroying the ships themselves. This meant the humans were holding back. They could have been destroying ships all along. Instead, they were choosing to humiliate the Krathiks. One of the Krathik's captains spoke privately to his crew. "They're playing with us, like a predator playing with wounded prey." Meanwhile, Lisa Hayes and her Marines were still attached to 3 cruisers. They had been drilling, creating noise, and causing minor damage for hours. Now Lisa decided it was time for the real boarding action. All teams, actual breach in 3, 2, 1 mark. The assault pods finally cut through the hulls. Marines poured into the Krathik ships, moving quickly through the corridors. But they did not attack the bridge or engineering. Instead, they moved through the ships throwing flashbang grenades, deploying smoke and using portable sound generators that created disorienting noise. The Krathik's warriors tried to fight back, but the humans were too fast. They moved in small teams using corridors that were too narrow for the large Krathiks to navigate easily. When warriors got close, the Marines would retreat around corners, throw another flashbang, and disappear into the smoke. One Krathik's warrior, blinded by smoke and deafened by noise, swung his claws at shadows. He hit nothing but walls. A human Marine appeared behind him. attached a small device to his armor, and vanished before the warrior could react. The device beeped. The warrior looked down at it in confusion. What was it, a bomb? No, it was a speaker. It began playing the sound of a crying human baby at maximum volume. The warrior tried to remove it, but it was stuck to his armor. The crying sound followed him everywhere. It was horrible, grating. It made his head hurt. All over the 3 boarded ships, similar devices were being attached to Krathik's warriors. Within minutes, dozens of warriors were dealing with crying baby sounds, barking dog sounds, or alarm clock sounds that would not stop. The psychological effect was devastating. The Krathiks could not concentrate, could not coordinate, could not fight effectively. Lisa's voice came over the Marine channel. All teams withdraw to pods. Mission accomplished. The Marines retreated as quickly as they had entered. The assault pods detached from the ships and flew back toward the Defiant. The entire boarding operation had lasted less than 20 minutes, but the damage to Krathik's morale was immense. 3 ships had been breached. Dozens of warriors had been humiliated, and the humans had not killed anyone. They had just made the Krathiks feel helpless and foolish. Aboard the Dreadclaw, Vexnar finally got his communications partially restored. He immediately called his fleet together. All ships, focus fire on the human vessel. I don't care about precision. Saturate the area with weapons fire. Destroy that ship. But the Defiant was already moving again. Amy had anticipated the order. She flew the ship in a wide arc, staying just outside the effective range of the Krathiks' weapons. The Krathiks fired anyway. Energy beams and projectiles lit up space, but they all missed. The Defiant was too fast, too maneuverable, and Amy was too skilled. They're wasting ammunition, Ben observed. At this rate, they'll deplete their supplies in a few hours. Jake smiled. That's exactly what we want. An enemy that's out of ammunition is an enemy that has to leave. But Vexnar had one more card to play. He ordered 4 of his fastest cruisers to pursue the Defiant at maximum speed. They would chase the human ship down and force it into a corner where it could not escape. The 4 cruisers accelerated. They were fast and they were determined. Amy saw them coming. We have pursuit, Commander. 4 cruisers moving at full speed. Can you outrun them? Jake asked. Amy checked her displays and shook her head. Not forever. They're faster in a straight line. I can dodge and weave, but eventually they'll corner us. Jake thought for a moment. Then we don't run. Danny, how much power can you give me? For what? Danny asked. For the main gun. I need maximum power. Danny understood immediately. I can reroute power from life support sensors and shields. That will give you about 300% of normal railgun capacity, but only for 1 shot. 1 shot is all I need, Jake said. He looked at Ben. Can you calculate a trajectory that will take out all 4 pursuing ships with 1 shot? Ben's eyes widened. You want to fire through all 4 ships? No, I want to fire at something else and let physics do the work. Can you do it? Ben began calculating rapidly. His fingers flew across his console. There's an asteroid cluster ahead. If we fire at the right angle, we can shatter multiple large asteroids simultaneously. The debris field will spread directly into the path of the pursuing ships. Do it, Jake ordered. The Defiant raced toward the asteroid cluster. The 4 Krathiks cruisers followed, gaining ground. They were close now, almost in weapons range. 30 seconds to optimal firing position, Ben announced. Amy pushed the ship to its limits. The engines roared with effort. 20 seconds. The Krathiks were right behind them. 10 seconds. The pursuing ships prepared to fire. Now, Ben shouted. Jake gave the order. Fire. The railgun discharged with tremendous power. The projectile shot forward and struck a cluster of 5 large asteroids simultaneously. The concentrated energy shattered all 5 rocks at once. Thousands of chunks of stone, metal, and ice exploded outward. The debris spread in a wide field directly in front of the pursuing Krathiks cruisers. The cruisers saw it too late. They were moving too fast to stop. They tried to turn, to dodge, but there was too much debris and not enough space. The first cruiser slammed into a boulder-sized chunk of asteroid. Its shields flared and held, but the impact damaged its forward hull and knocked it off course. The second cruiser tried to go around but got hit by dozens of smaller rocks. Its shields collapsed under the repeated impacts. The third and fourth cruisers managed to slow down enough to avoid serious damage, but they had to abort their pursuit. The debris field was too dangerous to navigate at high speed. The Defiant, meanwhile, had already cleared the field and was circling back toward the main fleet. That was incredible, Amy said, breathing hard from the intense flying. Warlord Vexnar stood on the bridge of the Dreadclaw and looked at his officers. They were all watching him, waiting for his command. Some looked exhausted, others looked worried. All of them had lost the confidence they had when this battle began. He thought about his options. He could continue fighting. Order his fleet to converge on the human ship and overwhelm it with sheer numbers. Eventually, they might succeed. But at what cost? How many more ships would be damaged? How many more warriors would be humiliated? And what if they did manage to destroy the Defiant? What then? The humans would send more ships, and those ships would be just as unpredictable, just as frustrating, just as impossible to fight using normal tactics. Vexnar had built his reputation on knowing when to fight and when to withdraw. He had survived 20 years of warfare because he understood that not every battle was worth winning. Some victories cost more than they gained. This was one of those battles. Order the fleet to withdraw, he said quietly. The bridge fell silent. His officers stared at him in shock. Warlord? His second-in-command said carefully. Did you say withdraw? You heard me, Vexnar replied. We are leaving this system. The blockade has ended, but Warlord, we haven't been defeated. We can still fight. Vexnar turned to look at him with cold eyes. Can we? Look at our fleet. Look at what one human ship has done to us. They've made us look like fools. They've damaged our ships, disrupted our communications, and broken our formation. And they did it without even using their full firepower. He gestured at the tactical display showing the Defiant. That ship could have destroyed us, but they chose not to. Do you understand what that means? They wanted us to know that we survived because they allowed it. They wanted us to understand that fighting humans is not worth the cost. The second-in-command was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right, Warlord. I understand. Good, Vexnar said. Then give the order. All ships are to jump to hyperspace. We leave immediately. The order went out to the fleet. One by one, the Krathix cruisers began turning away from Epsilon 7. Their engines powered up for hyperspace jumps. On the Defiant, Ben detected the movement. Commander, the Krathix fleet is powering up their hyperspace drives. It looks like they're preparing to leave. Jake had been expecting this, but he still felt relief when he heard it. Confirm their trajectory. Make sure they're actually leaving the system. Trajectory confirmed, Ben said. They're heading out of the system. All 12 ships. Amy let out a breath she'd been holding. We did it. They're actually retreating. Don't celebrate yet, Jake warned. Wait until they jump. One by one, the Krathix cruisers vanished into hyperspace. The massive ships disappeared in flashes of light, leaving empty space behind. Within 5 minutes, the entire fleet was gone. Only then did Jake allow himself to smile. Now we can celebrate. Excellent work, everyone. Amy, take us to the planet. Let's check on the Valran. The Defiant moved toward Epsilon 7. On the planet's surface, the Valran colonists were emerging from their shelters. They had watched the entire battle on their sensors, hardly believing what they had seen. Colony Director Zixnal stood in the command center, looking at the small human ship approaching their planet. One ship, just one destroyer, and it had driven away the most feared pirate fleet in the sector. He opened a communication channel. Human ship, this is Colony Director Zixnal. We don't know how to thank you. You saved our entire colony. Jake's face appeared on the screen. No thanks necessary, Director. We were just doing our job. Is everyone on the planet safe? Yes, all our people are accounted for. The Krathix never landed. They only threatened us from orbit. But we were terrified. We thought we would be enslaved or killed. Not on our watch, Jake said. The blockade is ended. Your colony is free. We'll stay in orbit for a few hours to make sure the Krathix don't come back. Then we'll return to Earth. Zixnal's antennae waved with emotion. Commander Morrison, what you did today will become legend among my people. We have heard stories about humans, but seeing it with our own eyes, it was extraordinary. How did you defeat such a large fleet with just one ship? Jake thought about how to answer that. We didn't defeat them in the traditional sense. We convinced them that fighting us wasn't worth the trouble. Sometimes that's more effective than destroying an enemy. I don't understand, Zixnal said. You had weapons that could have destroyed their ships. Why didn't you use them? Because dead enemies can't spread the word, Jake explained. Now Vexinar and his entire fleet will go back to Krathix space and tell everyone what happened here. They'll tell other pirates and warlords that attacking human-protected colonies is a bad idea. That message will save more lives than destroying 12 ships would have. Zixnal was quiet for a moment, processing this wisdom. Humans are very clever. And very frightening, Jake smiled slightly. We prefer to think of ourselves as practical. Get some rest, Director. Your people have been through a lot. We'll keep watch. The communication ended. On the Defiance bridge, the crew finally allowed themselves to relax. They had been at combat readiness for nearly 24 hours. Everyone was exhausted but happy. Danny, ship status? Jake asked. All systems green, Danny reported. We used a lot of ammunition and fuel, but nothing critical. The ship is in good shape. Lisa, marine casualties? 0 casualties, Commander, Lisa replied. A few minor bruises and one marine who twisted his ankle during the boarding action, but everyone is fine. Ben, sensor sweep. Any sign of Krathix ships returning? Negative. The system is clear. Just us and the Valran. Jake nodded with satisfaction. Good, Amy, maintain orbit. Everyone else, get some rest. We'll stay here for 6 hours, then head home. The crew began standing down from combat stations. Jake stayed on the bridge, looking at the planet below. It was a beautiful world, green and blue, home to millions of peaceful Valran who had almost lost everything. But they were safe now. The humans had made sure of that. Across the galaxy in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Zelthar received the report. The Krathix fleet had withdrawn. The Valran colony was safe. The human destroyer had completed the mission successfully. The other ambassadors gathered to hear the news. Some looked relieved. Others looked uncomfortable. One ship, Ambassador Threx said, her crystalline body shimmering. One human ship against 12 Krathix cruisers. And the humans won. Did they win? Ambassador Kelrin asked. They didn't destroy the Krathix fleet. They achieved their objective, Zelthar corrected. The blockade was lifted. The Valran are safe. That is victory. But at what cost to our reputation? Another ambassador asked. By asking the humans for help, we admit that we cannot handle our own problems. Zelthar looked at the ambassador with patient eyes. We asked for help because we needed it. There is no shame in that. And the humans did what none of us could do. They faced Vexnar and made him retreat. The young Viridian ambassador spoke up. I have been reading the battle reports. The human tactics were unusual. They used psychological warfare, electronic interference, harassment tactics. They did not fight with honor. No, Zelthar agreed. They did not. But they fought effectively. And in the end, that is what mattered. The Valran don't care about honor. They care about being alive. Ambassador Threx chimed thoughtfully. The humans are changing the way warfare is conducted in our galaxy. Other species will study their tactics. Some will copy them. Some will, Zelthar said. But most won't, because human tactics require a specific mindset. They require creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to do things that seem dishonorable or uncivilized. Most species cannot think that way. Should we be concerned about this? Kelrin asked. If humans can defeat the Krathix so easily, what else can they do? Zelthar considered the question carefully. The humans are not a threat to the Council. They follow our laws. They respect our authority. But they are a reminder that the galaxy is changing. We can no longer rely on old ways of thinking. We must adapt, or we will become irrelevant. The council chamber was quiet as the ambassadors thought about this. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years using established rules and traditions. The humans, newcomers who had only been in space for a few centuries, had shown them that those rules could be broken. It was both frightening and exciting. Several days later, in Krathix space, Warlord Vexnar stood before the Council of Warlords. These were the most powerful Krathix in the Empire, the leaders of the greatest fleets. They had gathered to hear his report about the failed blockade at Epsilon 7. Vexnar told them everything. He did not hide his failure or make excuses. He explained how one human ship had systematically dismantled his fleet's cohesion without destroying a single cruiser. He described the psychological tactics, the electronic warfare, the unconventional strategies. The other warlords listened in silence. When he finished, one of them spoke. You retreated from one ship? I retreated from humans, Vexnar corrected. There is a difference. Explain, another warlord demanded. Vexnar looked at them all. We have all heard the stories from the border wars, how humans fight without honor, How they use tactics that seem cowardly but prove effective. I always thought those stories were exaggerations. I was wrong. He brought up a holographic display showing the battle. Watch how they